All right, so I want to tell you a little bit of a further story to add to our house base class. Now, house base class also can use interfaces, and I can show you how. So basically, we have had these two different options. Let's say the house has some pros that are really good at archery, and then they have some people that are insanely good at barding, basically, or being a bard, I don't know, at music, basically. So if we want to have offspring that is good at both, they are great at archery as well as music, we cannot just use inheritance. What we need to use instead are interfaces, so that we can get this archer who's great at shooting arrows with just 3 fingers, but at the same time insanely good at singing. So this guy is singing while doing archery, and that is something we can achieve by using interfaces in Kotlin. Therefore, let's go back to our little example that we had here with secondary and tertiary. Let's say we have another class called offspring. All right, let me add another Kotlin class here. I'm going to call this one offspring, more like so. And this class will inherit from secondary. So it will be a child of our archer or knight. Okay. So now for this to be able or possible to happen, we need to make sure that our secondary is an open class as well. So otherwise it cannot be inherited from. So secondary can now be inherited from. So we have offspring. So basically our knight of the house of base class has offspring. Now the next thing that we would like to have is that our offspring not only learns from the knight to be good at archery, but also learns from his aunt, for example, who has insane skills at singing and playing instruments. In order to pass down both of these skills and traits, what we can do is we can use interfaces. So let's go ahead and add a new interface here. It's the first time we're going to use interfaces in our examples. So the first one will be archery. I'm going to create an interface called archery. And then inside of this interface, I'm going to have the archery function. And what it does is it gives archery skills from secondary. Okay. And then we're going to create another interface. And this interface we're going to call singer. You could call it bard or whatever, but I'm just going to call it singer. And now this interface has just one function, which is sing. So it's going to have singing skills from lady tertiary. So our lady tertiary, we saw her earlier. She's insane at singing and playing the instruments and stuff. And she teaches or passes down how to sing only if you say, okay, I am going to apply or follow your interface. So I'm going to accept your skills. I'm going to accept learning from you. Only then will my offspring be able to apply or use these functions. So how can we get those? Well, we can get those by adding to our offspring after inheriting from secondary, because he's the daddy of offspring. We can add a comma and then add the interfaces that we want to implement. So now you see I am implementing archery as well as singer. Now, at our early stage of our program so far, we didn't need those implementations of interfaces. But later on in the course, we are going to do that. And I just wanted to make sure that you are prepared for when that comes. So basically what we do with this, we just say, I want to be able to use your skills, basically functions, properties, all of the good stuff. All right. So now let's go ahead and use archery. So now we can, as offspring, obviously also improve ourselves. So we can just say, I'm going to override whatever archery is. So first of all, I'm going to call the super function, which basically is going to execute this function. So you see, we don't need to add the open keyword because we are inside of an interface, and an interface really wants you to implement its functions and override its functions. That's what the whole idea behind interfaces is. So now we're saying inside of our offspring, override archery, call the super function, and we don't have to do that, but we can. So we can also comment this out and implement our own thing, but you can keep it in there. And then we can implement our own code. So we're going to say archery skills enhanced by offspring, because not only did we all learn all the skills that our secondary dad had, but we also learned our own skills along our life, along the way, along the journey of our life. We became an insanely good archer. And at the same time, we also learned singing from our aunt tertiary. And we went ahead and went super nuts and became the best singer in the world. We improved our singing skills enhanced by offspring. All right, now let's go ahead and call any of these functions inside of our start KT. So we're going to get rid of all of these other objects, and we're just going to have an offspring object. So var, and let's call this one Frank, who is going to be of type offspring, like so. Now our Frank can do archery. Our Frank can have a role or has a role. Our Frank has core values. Our Frank can sing. So you can see Frank as the offspring, basically the inheritance or inheriting from secondary, that is inheriting from base class, has all of the base class skills, has all of the secondary skills, and also has learned skills from his daddy and his aunt. So now going back here, let's actually execute this to see all of the things that Frank can do. So archery skills from secondary, archery skills enhanced by offspring, knight of the house of base class. So he has the role of knight of the house. He has the core values of house base class, which is this function here. And he can sing. He learned it by Lady Tertiary, who's his aunt. And he even got better at singing than what Lady Tertiary could ever achieve. There's one last thing that I realized, and that is archery. The interface should not be called archery, it's called archer, okay? So not archery, but archer. And let me get rid of archery here and say archer instead. So the function is still archery, but the interface was called archer. Now, the thing is, you can also be more specific here and say archer.archery, but it's really not necessary. This is just something, if you ever see that, it's basically doing the same thing, saying call archery from the archer interface function. So what's the idea behind interfaces? And that is an age-old question that I'm going to answer in the next video.